14-year-old Katya Martynova, and 17-year-old Lena Samokhina. Together, they spent almost 4 years in an underground bunker. Viktor Mokov, who kept them there and did whatever he wanted with their bodies every day, he made their lives hell. When police discovered a secret bunker in western Russia, they were shocked. 2 young girls were found in the bunker, 6 meters underground, completely exhausted, and looking like old women. One of the girls is 8 months pregnant. They can barely move because they have been trapped in a small bunker for years, without sunlight or good nutrition. Moreover, almost every day a man comes to them and uses their bodies for his own pleasure. It is an incredible torture. One girl, Katya Martynova, wrote a book many years later. She told the horrific details of her life in the bunker. What is the full story? The story begins in September 2000 when 14-year-old Katya Martynova went to her first disco party. She was a very young girl and still playing with dolls. Katya came from an ordinary family. She was born and raised in the city of Ryazan, a small town in western Russia. Her mother is a saleswoman in a shop. Her father works in a factory. She also has an older sister. Katya lives in a happy and prosperous family. She does not realize how dangerous life is out there. Like most teenagers, Katya wants to feel like an adult. That's why she was very happy when one day her friend invited her to a disco party. 17-year-old Lena Samokhina is the best friend of Katya's older sister. They wanted to go to the disco together, but Katya's older sister was not at home. So Katya decided to go with Lena, but she didn't tell her parents where she was going. She just said she was going for a walk. Katya was so excited to go to a disco party for the first time. She and her friend met Lena that night and had a great time. At 10 p.m. it was time for the girls to go home. At that time, most people did not have mobile phones, so the girls could not tell their parents where they were or ask them to pick them up. Therefore, they had to go home by public transportation. However, that night, it was difficult to go home by city bus, because there were many young men and women who also wanted to go home after the party. At that moment, a car stopped next to the girls. There were 2 men in the car who offered them a ride home. 17-year-old Lena agreed because she was happy to get back home quickly. And Katya decided to go with her. This reckless act had dire consequences for the girls. They got into the car and gave their address, but they never made it home that night, and their lives would never be the same from then on. The driver was an older man who didn't talk much named Viktor. Next to him was a relatively young man who introduced himself as Lyosha. They invited the 2 girls to stop by a shop and buy some chocolates. The men were joking around and seemed very nice, so they didn't arouse any suspicion. The car stopped. Lyosha entered the shop and came out with chocolate and a bottle of alcohol. When the car was driving, they were then offered alcohol to drink. And the 2 girls agreed. Katya choked because she had never drunk alcohol before. Then they gave her a bottle of water. A few moments later, Katya and Lena felt weak and exhausted. Viktor suddenly said that he needed to see his sister for a while. The girls couldn't refuse because they were already very weak. Only then would they understand that the men had mixed tranquilizers into their drinks. The car arrives at a remote place. Lyosha carries the half-conscious Katya out of the car and into the garage. Then Viktor comes in and tells her to undress. The girl refuses, but Viktor threatens her. Under the influence of sleeping pills, Katya could not fight and Viktor forced her in the garage. After that, Viktor forced Katya to crawl into the basement. The girl found herself in a small bunker and hoped that the next day the man would let her go home. She did not imagine that the bunker would be her home for the next 4 years. Viktor then did the same thing to Lena in the house. When he wakes up in the morning, Viktor takes him to the bunker to hang out with Katya. They begged to get out of that terrible place, but Viktor locked them there. They screamed and asked for help, but no one heard. Viktor comes bringing food and water into the bunker and promises to release them one day. But days passed and they remained locked up there. Viktor will come to the bunker and call them individually. He took them to another small room next to theirs and forced them to sleep in turns on the red blanket. During the first days, the girls tried to resist. They refused to obey his will. Then Victor turned off their electricity and threatened to close the ventilation. The girls would feel buried alive. The next moment, Victor came down with a knife and even hit Lena with a hose. Then he dragged Katya to the next room and satisfied himself on the red blanket. Over time, the girls lost their strength due to malnutrition and lack of oxygen underground. Victor gave them very little food and water. There was also no drainage or running water in the bunker, so the girls had to use a small bucket as a toilet. The bucket quickly filled with feces, so Lena and Katya had to breathe the horrible smell until Victor came and took it away. Lena and Katya spend their days planning an escape. They want to attack Victor, but there is not much in the bunker to do so. Victor only gives them a small blunt knife, a steamer, and an electric stove, so they can cook their own food. One day they decided to hit him with a pan, but they could never carry out the plan because they felt too weak physically to defeat the strong man. They were afraid of making him angry, because Victor often threatened that he would close the vents or fill the bunker with cement. He could kill them and no one would know. Therefore, all they could do was comply with his demands and satisfy his lusts, so as not to anger him and at least get food and water. Victor came to them sometimes once every 2 or 3 days, sometimes every day or even several times a day. And every time he just satisfied his lust with their bodies. He considered them his toys or maybe pets. At first they thought the second man in the car would also come to them, but during that time only Victor came. Later they found out that the young man who gave them chocolate was a woman named Lena Samokhina. She was Victor's henchman who helped him carry out his evil plan. Days, weeks, and months passed. Victor sometimes gave them buckets of water to clean themselves, but the amount of water was not enough. Therefore, their bodies and hair were always sticky and dirty. Occasionally, Victor gave them new sheets and some clothes. After a few months in the bunker, the girls lost the will to fight and even stopped planning to escape. They felt that everything was in vain, and all they wanted was to survive. So they fulfilled all of Victor's wishes. Victor became nicer to them. He started bringing them more new things. For example, on New Year's Eve, he brought them a box of chocolates and various household items, cleaning products, and kitchen utensils. Victor also brought them playing cards. In addition, he gave Lena an English learning book and Katya a drawing book and crayons. The girls could at least do some activities. Lena started learning English and Katya started drawing. She painted the dark, gloomy walls with cheerful pictures. This helped her maintain her hope. At that time, Viktor Mokov was 50 years old. He was born and raised in a small town, Skopintsino, in western Russia. Almost all his life, Viktor worked as a mechanic in a factory. He was considered one of the best workers in his company. In his youth, he seemed like a nice guy, but he never had a romantic relationship with girls. Since childhood, Viktor was awkward in socializing and very insecure. He was married in his youth, but after 3 months, his wife left him for unknown reasons. Since then, he has never had a serious relationship with a woman again. The only woman he loved in his life was his mother. They lived together most of their lives in a house in the suburbs. His mother was a strong, dominant woman who oppressed him in every way. That's why Viktor might be a crazy maniac desperate to find a woman. So he decided to do something terrible, build a secret bunker and put the prisoners there. He planned it for years. It took him 3 years to dig a bunker in his yard under the garage. The bunker was carefully camouflaged, so it was very difficult to find. The bunker was closed by a concrete security door and was located 6 meters underground. So screaming and calling for help while inside was useless. Viktor equipped the bunker with everything necessary for the life of his prisoners. He installed electricity and ventilation. Inside there were 2 beds, a table, chairs, and other equipment. Viktor committed his first kidnapping 6 months before he kidnapped Lena and Katya. However, the teenage girl managed to escape. Unfortunately, the girl did not report it to the police, and this incident was only discovered several years later. After that, Viktor became more careful, so that his 2 new victims, Katya and Lena, had no chance to escape. Then their situation became even worse. 6 months after being trapped in the bunker, 17-year-old Lena realized she was pregnant. She begged Victor to let her go, but of course he refused. Therefore, Lena had to give birth to her baby in unsanitary and terrible conditions, without any help or medicine from medical personnel. During her pregnancy, Victor continued to call her to the next room and satisfy himself. When the time for delivery was near, Victor brought them a book on gynecology and obstetrics. Katya, who was 15 years old at the time, had to study the book to help her friend give birth. The girl only had small scissors, cotton, hydrogen peroxide, and cloth. A miracle, a healthy baby boy was finally born. 2 weeks later, Victor demanded that they give him the baby, but they refused because they thought he would kill him. The baby lived with them in a dirty bunker for almost 2 months. One day, the girls woke up and realized the baby was missing. It turned out that Victor mixed sleeping pills into their drinking water and took the baby. He didn't kill her but left the baby at the entrance of an apartment building. When Lena got pregnant for the second time, the story repeated itself. Katya had to help her friend give birth to a baby boy for the second time, and the baby stayed with them for 4 months. After that, they themselves decided to give it to Victor. She left the baby again in front of an apartment. The 2 baby boys were later found to be in an orphanage and never knew who their parents were. As for Katya, she could not get pregnant. She entered the bunker when she was 14 years old and had not even menstruated because of malnutrition, and lived in misery in the bunker. She could not get pregnant. Meanwhile, Lena, who had given birth twice, was pregnant again for the 3rd time. It was a nightmare for her. The girl was exhausted and thought she would not survive the 3rd birth later. By then, Victor had grown bored with his 2 captives and began looking for a 3rd victim. One day he brought a mattress into the bunker and ordered the 2 girls to put a 2nd tier on top of one of the beds. At that time, Victor lost his guard. He thought that his 2 prisoners were completely destroyed and would never be able to try to escape again. That's why one day he decided to take Katya out of the bunker and bring her into the house so she could take a shower. Then he took her out and told Katya to help him give sleeping pills to his 3rd victim, a student who moved into Victor's house and rented a room. Katya realized that this was their chance to survive. When Victor took Katya to meet the 3rd girl, Katya had written a letter in which she told her situation and asked her to contact the police. Katya secretly slipped the letter among the girls' belongings. That day, Victor failed to carry out his plan. Katya returned to the bunker, and now she and Lena are waiting in the hope that the girl will see their letter and report it to the police. One day in May 2004, they heard strange voices. An unknown man entered the bunker and asked the girls, "Are you still alive?" Katya and Lena were very happy. For the first time in 4 years, they could finally see the sunlight. When released, the girls were very pale, and Lena, who was 8 months pregnant, could hardly even move. Viktor Mokov was arrested and sentenced to 17 years in prison. He was shocked when he heard his sentence. He said, "Why so long? I didn't kill them. I fed and raised them at my own expense." The maniac never felt guilty and was convinced that he had done nothing wrong. Victor's accomplice, Lena Samokhina, who dressed as a man and helped him lead the girls into a trap, received a sentence of 5.5 years in prison. Victor's mother, Lena Samokhina, who lived with him all this time, insisted that she had no idea that her son had kidnapped and held the 2 girls in the bunker. Did he tell the truth? Did he not ask why his son brought food and things into the bunker? But no one could prove his guilt, so he remained free. What happened to the girls after 4 years in the bunker? Lena gave birth to her 3rd child, but the baby did not survive. She decided to forget everything and refused to talk to the press. She became an English teacher and never had another child. Katya Martynova continued her studies. She found the strength to live a normal life and even learned to trust men. She got married and gave birth to 2 daughters and a son. She is also open and does not hesitate to talk about her sad experiences. Katya Martynova also wrote a book, Confession of a Dungeon Prisoner, which will morally help all women who suffer from violence. Katya Martynova is an amazing woman who was able to survive all these horrors, and at the same time, keep faith in goodness. Despite being held captive for years, he remains a good person. Today, he helps victims of violence. Sometimes, when he is in a bad mood, he remembers his years in the bunker, and he realizes that his current problems are nothing. In 2021, Viktor Mokov was released from prison and even gave an interview to reporters. He did not understand his mistake, and he never regretted his actions. He even joked that he needed to get involved with one of the girls again to help her give birth to a child, something that is very inappropriate to say.